We've all heard about spies and secret agents. They seem like characters in movies or books, right? Well, what if I told you there is another group of individuals whose job it is to secretly influence and control other countries? Welcome to a world of economic warfare where the weapons aren't guns or bombs, but numbers and figures. Imagine working in a field where your salary is measured in millions and your decisions can impact entire economies. That's the world of an economic hit man, also known as an EHM. And let me introduce you to John Perkins, the author of Confessions of an Economic Hit Man, a captivating account of his time as one of these shadowy figures. Before we dive into the book, let's take a moment to understand the role of an economic hit man. These are highly skilled professionals who use their expertise in economics, finance, and persuasion to get what their employers want. Unlike traditional hitmen who use violence, economic hitmen rely on financial manipulation, debt, and strategic partnerships to achieve their goals. Now let's meet our protagonist, John Perkins. With degrees in both political science and economics from the University of California, Berkeley, Perkins seemed destined for success. However, after graduation, he found himself disillusioned with traditional corporate jobs. It was during this phase of his life that he stumbled upon a unique opportunity, a job that would take him around the world and allow him to shape economies and influence governments. In 1961, Perkins joined Charles T. Main Incorporated, a Boston-based engineering firm that specialized in overseas projects. His initial assignments involved traveling to developing countries to oversee infrastructure projects. But as Perkins rose within the company, he uncovered a darker side of these missions. Each country he visited had been saddled with massive debts from previous projects, debts that they could never hope to repay. He witnessed firsthand how these loans were used to buy off corrupt officials and gain control of vital resources. But what was the real purpose of these loans? You see, these loans were never about helping these countries develop. They were about control. By loading these nations with unsustainable debts, Perkins and his colleagues ensured that they would always remain dependent on the lenders, primarily the United States. Once in debt, these countries had no choice but to comply with the demands of their creditors. They had to sell their natural resources cheaply, support U.S. policies in international organizations, and allow American military bases on their soil. It was a clever strategy, a form of economic imperialism that bypassed the need for soldiers and guns. As Perkins traveled to different countries, he noticed a disturbing pattern. In Ecuador, for instance, the national hero, the revered Eloy Alfaro, was brought down with the help of a large loan that made him dependent on U.S. interests. Similarly, in Indonesia, the government fell when it was overwhelmed by debts incurred from infrastructure projects. The method was always the same. First, they would load a country with an enormous sum of money, knowing that it would be too much for them to repay. Then they would wait for that country to default on its debt, essentially giving them no choice but to comply with the demands of the lenders. The cycle would start again when the U.S. government or its agencies would come in and offer a new loan, supposedly to help the country recover. But in reality, this was just another way to increase their control. These loans were like traps, cleverly disguised offers of help that turned out to be shackles of debt. For example, in one case, Perkins helped structure a loan of $40 million to the government of Panama. This loan was for a hydroelectric project that would bring electricity to only 2% of the population. It was a project that would never truly benefit the Panamanian people. Instead, the real beneficiaries were the U.S. companies who received tax breaks and cheap electric power. These projects were so profitable for the U.S. companies and the financial institutions involved that they often didn't even bother to complete them. A prime example is the Suntrest hydroelectric plant in Honduras. Despite receiving a loan of $200 million, the project was never finished. But that didn't stop Perkins' company from earning millions in fees. It was a win-win situation for them, regardless of whether the project was completed or not. You might be wondering why these countries didn't just say no to these deals. Well, that's where the true brilliance of the system lay. The people in charge of making these decisions had a choice: cooperate and get rich, or resist and risk being overthrown. It was a tough choice, especially in countries where corruption and poverty were rampant. Many leaders chose the easy path, lining their own pockets while their countries suffered under the weight of insurmountable debt. But not everyone did. There were leaders who understood the trap they were being offered. Take, for instance, Rafael Trujillo, the dictator of the Dominican Republic. When Trujillo refused to accept a loan that would have given the U.S. control over his country's economy, he was assassinated. Similarly, when Jacobo Arbenz, the democratically elected president of Guatemala, attempted to redistribute land to his country's poor, he too was ousted with the help of the CIA. These weren't isolated incidents. They were part of a larger pattern of control and manipulation. As Perkins worked on these projects, he saw firsthand how ordinary people suffered. He witnessed the poverty, the hunger, and the lack of basic services like healthcare and education. Yet he continued his work, justifying it as a necessary evil. He was part of a system that perpetuated the cycle of poverty, and he was profiting from it. But as time went on, Perkins began to question his actions. He started to feel the weight of his guilt, knowing that he was contributing to the suffering of millions. Eventually, his conscience got the better of him, and he resigned from his position. He realized that he couldn't be part of a system that exploited and harmed innocent people. Leaving the job was just the beginning. Perkins wanted to do more. He wanted to expose the truth about the economic hit men and the system they operated within. So he wrote a book, Confessions of an Economic Hit Man, which became an instant bestseller. The book shook the world, exposing the hidden mechanisms of economic control and manipulation. It forced people to look beyond the headlines and see the bigger picture. It wasn't just about loans and infrastructure projects. It was about power, control, and the relentless pursuit of profit. The book raised many important questions. It challenged the status quo and called for a more transparent and equitable global system. In Confessions of an Economic Hit Man, Perkins doesn't just tell his story. He paints a vivid picture of a world that most of us are unaware of. He shows us how economic decisions made by powerful nations can impact the lives of millions. The book is more than just a memoir. It's a cautionary tale, a warning about the dangers of unchecked corporate power and the importance of ethical leadership. But it's also a hopeful tale. It's a story of redemption. After years of perpetuating the system, Perkins chose to walk away from it. He chose to use his voice to speak truth to power. That takes courage, conviction, and integrity. So what can we learn from this book? First, we must be aware of the tactics used to control other countries. We must understand the motives behind seemingly helpful offers and the dangers of falling into debt traps. Second, we need to hold our leaders accountable. We must demand transparency and ethical behavior from those who represent us on the global stage. Finally, we should strive to be like Perkins in the end, using our knowledge and influence to fight for a better world. Confessions of an Economic Hit Man is a must-read for anyone who wants to understand how the world really works. It's a book that challenges us, educates us, and inspires us to be better global citizens. As we close this exploration of John Perkins's captivating journey, remember that the world is shaped not just by those in power, but by each one of us. If you found this video insightful, don't hesitate to drop a comment below sharing your thoughts or any additional insights you'd like to add. Your engagement helps us continue to craft more enriching content for you. Until next time, stay curious, stay critical, and above all, stay informed. Let's keep learning, growing, and making a positive impact together. Thanks for watching.